Hi everyone, welcome back to this channel. I realized that my bangs are getting really long and I feel like I need to cut them soon. But today's video is a quite exciting one. It's gonna be about medical advice. I find that you guys enjoy my content more about medical field or my job so much more than my vlog, so I try to mix it up a little bit. Of course, there's more for me to kind of share on my life, so my vlogs do take a little bit more of a precedent than the medical stuff, but I'm always happy to give you more advice and just talk about things having to do with the medical field, because it is a very small community, especially for physician assistants. And so I think that just being able to share this knowledge with you is so great. And if you ever see me in person, which I've met a couple of you before, I mean, like, I love meeting you guys. I think it's so exciting to see you. I'm really awkward sometimes because I don't expect you guys to come up to me, but you do. So just know that if I seem really shy, it's because I am, but I do really like meeting you guys, and I am so happy that you guys enjoy these videos and you find them helpful. So without further ado, we're going to talk about CME today, and that stands for Continuing Medical Education. It's important that you know the medical field is a field that never stops changing, right? Medications are always coming out every day. There's always new guidelines that come out. And then on top of that, new procedures and new standards of care. So something a couple years ago that could have been the standard of care is now no longer the first line. And so with all the new medications and new procedures and new guidelines, we as practicing practitioners have to keep up to date with all of these things, because otherwise the knowledge that you're working with for your patients is dated and it's just not smart. So specifically for PAs, we have to get 100 hours of Category 1 and Category 2 CME within a 2-year span. It's not too difficult. You just have to know where to find them. And I think for people who are just starting out in this field, who just got a job or just came out of school, it's difficult to know where to look for them without spending a bunch of money. Of course, there is the typical CME that you can go to conferences and stuff to spend money on, which I will get more into later, but some of us can't afford that. And so I'm going to give you a couple of resources where you can get CME for free, or even just like less than having to go to a conference. So the biggest distinction between Category 1 and Category 2 is that Category 1 is anything that has to do with reading articles, going to conferences, and doing like actual learning activities. I think Category 2 includes like stuff that is not as hands-on. I think precepting might be Category 2. Don't quote me on that, but I will give you a picture that kind of describes the difference between the two. A lot of your CME is going to be geared towards Category 1, and actually 50 of the 100 hours have to be Category 1. So for me personally, I just do everything that's Category 1 so that I don't have to worry about counting how much of each I have. I made a list of different types of CME that we can discuss, and the first thing is using online resources. So if you use UpToDate to look up medications or how to treat a certain thing, what is the guidelines or the standard of care for certain things, how to work up a certain disease, UpToDate is the greatest thing that you can use. I'm going to show you what that looks like. So when you go into UpToDate, which is right here, let's say I'm going to do treatment of Lyme disease, I can get a screen I mean, I can get all of these treatments, right? If I'm talking about erythema migrans, which is just that bullseye rash, you can do doxy for 10 days. You can also do amoxicillin or cefuroxime. If we're looking at neurological disease, so someone who has Lyme disease and has a facial palsy, you can also do doxy, but then your period of therapy would be for 14 to 21 days. So a chart like this is really helpful because it kind of summarizes everything that you need to find really quickly. But let's say you want to learn more about Lyme disease in general, right? There's clinical stages, what to look for. There is, like the erythema migrans that we talked about, that bullseye rash, this is what it looks like. So Up to Date kind of gives you a lot. It gives you the epidemiology, what the vector is, how it, creates its pathology. So a lot of Up to Date, it's a lot of information, but it's really helpful. And I think that if you're a practicing practitioner, this app is so great because it kind of gives you a little bit of everything that you need. So once you look up all this stuff, over time it accumulates. And if you go to your CME on the side here, it will kind of give you how many you've accumulated over time. I think within the last couple of months, I have accumulated maybe 30 CME. So that's a lot. That's a big chunk of your 100 CME that you need. And then what you have to do is you just select your credit, you answer a couple of questions, and then you get a certificate and you upload that to your certification website. So besides Up to Date, what I also use is something called Open Evidence. And Open Evidence is very, very similar to Up to Date. So let me show you guys what this looks like. Open Evidence is almost like an AI app where you can put in a question, a medical question, and it pulls resources from medical journals, from JAMA, from a bunch of accredited places, and it gives you a summary of what exactly you need. So let's say you're rounding in the hospital or you need a very quick answer. Open Evidence and Up to Date is probably your best resources. Open Evidence is a little bit more concise because, like I said, it gives you that summary that you need. But then Up to Date is more lengthy. It'll give you a huge explanation. And if you don't want that, but you want a short answer, then Open Evidence is probably better for you. All right. So I'm going to screen share again. Let's say our question is, how do we follow up with meningitis, right? So that's my question. I'm going to ask Open Evidence. It's analyzing my question and it's going to pull a bunch of stuff from different websites. So here they give us all of the references that they looked at. They have Lancet, they have, clinical infectious disease. So all of these articles. So they give me what I want to look for during their hospitalization, but then they also give me a post-discharge follow-up, and it says the most critical component is hearing assessment, especially for kids. That's really important because there can be neurological consequences of meningitis. For adults, not so much. And so this is really, really concise and short and helpful. But then let's say I want to know more about the length of treatment for meningitis. We can look that up as well. So what is the length of treatment for strep pneumo meningitis? And this is important because depending on different bacteria, your treatment for meningitis the length of it changes. So here, right, it's searching for the answers again. The recommended treatment duration for strep pneumomeningitis is 10 to 14 days, which is correct. Other ones like Neisseria meningitis, I think might be 7. Let's see. What's the length of treatment for Neisseria meningitis? This, I think, is definitely a different length. So We'll see what it says. So 5 to 7 days. So like I said, the different bacteria have different treatment lengths, but all of this to say that this is a very, very nice, like, short and concise answer. So if you're in a pinch and you need a quick answer, this is a great app to use. And then once you finish all of this, you go to your name and basically you click on CME, and then it will open up everything to show you how much CME you have. So you go to your CME and then you basically claim how many credits you have. So each one is 0.5. So every question you have is 0.5. If you ask 100 questions, that is 50 CME right there. Super easy. And you don't have to pay for this. It's completely free if you have an NPI. So up to date and open evidence, great resources. The next thing that you can do for CME is to go to conferences, right? So this includes APA. This includes if you're part of New York PA's, NISPA. There's an association for physician assistants in almost every state. So if you live in Texas, there's one there too. The one that I'm familiar with is New York because I practice in New York, but they have conferences every year, and they have these conferences so that people can gather, and then we have PAs that present PowerPoints and do skill workshops. And the point of these conferences is for you to learn from other people who have more knowledge. I've been to APA and I've also been to NISPA. I went to NISPA when I was a student, and then I went to APA last year, which was my first year as like a practitioner. And I want to say when I went to APA, probably gained about 15 hours of CME. And that's because you go to these conferences. One conference gives you, I believe, like 1 or 2 credits. That is one option. The only thing about conferences is, yes, you have to pay for the conference, and then also a lot of times on top of the fee for the conference, you have to pay for the membership. So that's separate. And then if the conference, let's say, is not in the state that you live in and it's somewhere else, you've got to pay for travel and you have to pay for hotel. But depending on where you work, if you're in a private practice, it might be a little bit more difficult. If you work in a hospital or a place that is more like academic and has that academic background, they usually provide you with a stipend for CME. So it can range anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000. It could be more than that, but usually it covers enough for you to travel and to go to the conference, and then whatever else is left over, you kind of just pay out of pocket. So yeah, there's always an opportunity to go to conference. I think it's nice to do it once in a while. You don't have to go every single year, but it's nice to, one, network, and then also get your CME, and you get to kind of go to a different place every year. So for me specifically, I like to go to the conferences or a different city or a different state where I've never been to, so I can kind of double that as like when I'm not doing the conference stuff at night, I'll get to go out and kind of venture about and travel a little bit. So it's like a 2-in-1 almost. That is the second way to get CME. The next way to get CME is if you work in a hospital that's a teaching hospital. A lot of times they will have CME built into curriculums for residents, and this includes journal talks. It includes the residents doing case studies and presenting these case studies. And so when they present, it's almost like you're learning again, because you are going to these talks, and the fellows and the residents have to kind of do a lot of background research and present all of this. So you as a PA get to sit in on these talks, learn a little bit, and gain CME. And it's like 1 hour is 1 credit, which is not bad at all. So if you go to a hospital or you work in a hospital that has that, that's free CME for you. You don't have to pay for that. It comes in built in with your job. So I would take advantage of that if you have the opportunity. Next, all of your recertifications, so your ACLS, BLS, doing your DEA courses, that all includes credits for CME. So don't just think that, oh, this is a requirement for me to work as a PA. Yes, it's a requirement for your hospital, but it also counts to your CME. So keep those certificates and upload them to your CME website and keep track of them that way. And like I said, most hospitals give you a stipend to use towards that, so definitely utilize that to your benefit as well. And then the last thing that I kind of wanted to talk about is reading journal articles. So like I said, you can do it through Open Evidence, but if you subscribe to AAPA or NISPA, working in ID, I subscribe to a lot of infectious disease journals and like associations. I would get these magazines, and you can read these magazines, and then at the very end there's a quiz, and you go online and you answer these quiz questions, probably about like 5 questions or so, and then you'll get a certificate for your CME. So that's another way to do it. That requires you to have a membership to get these magazines, but it's not that expensive. It's probably like $100 to $200 a year, depending on the association. And I think it's really nice because, especially if you're in a specialty, you get that extra supportive evidence and extra information when you do subscribe to these magazines and article places. So that's always really nice to have. Those are all the ways that I know how to get CME. If you have additional ways, definitely leave them down below. I'm always open to learning about them. If you guys have any more questions, definitely leave them down below. I hope this video was helpful for you. Let me know what video you want to see next, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!